Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining another NoBeC talk. My name is Paulius. I am the Managing Director of the Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics. And welcome again. Our agenda for today will be the same as in all our talks. There will be a very short welcome. Then we will have our NoBeC Early Career Researcher videos. We will have one new video and one video from a previous ECR because the sound didn't work properly that time. So we thought we would give you the chance to listen to it correctly this time. And then we will have our main talk for today with Professor Raymond Duch from the University of Oxford. And at the end, 15 minutes for questions. As I always do, just a short reminder that this speaker series is organized by our Penn Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics. We are a research center at the University of Pennsylvania that works on consulting, research, and training to enable organizations to sustainably enact positive behavioral change. Here's our website, and if you follow this QR code, you can follow us on Twitter as well. I wanted also to remind you about our fall programming for the talks. So in 2 weeks, we will have Matt Lasmanis from Sage Therapeutics, and then we will have 3 more talks as well. If you visit our website or follow the QR code, you can see all the information, our previous talks, videos, and so on, and subscribe to our public calendars and emails and so on. If this is the first time you're joining, a few ground rules. Please keep yourself muted. If you can keep your camera on so that we have a more interactive experience. If you want, you can change your username to reflect your name, your affiliation as well, to know where you're joining from. For questions, we have today, as in previous occasions, a co-author in the audience. So you can ask your questions in the chat and they will answer them. And you can also use the raise hand function at the end in the 15 minutes for questions. We are transmitting live on Facebook as always, and the recording of this session, as well as all of our previous sessions, are available in our website. Right, so with this, I'm going to play the video of our first NoBeC Early Career Researcher for today. Patrick Mikkelsen is a researcher at the Department of Psychology at the University of Gothenburg. The presentation is called On the Value of Investigating Experiences and Perceptions of Nudges. And if you follow the QR code or the link on the screen, you can see his Twitter profile and see more about his research. So I'm going to share the video now.
Hi there, my name is Patrick Mikkelsen. I'm a researcher at the Department of Psychology, University of Gothenburg, and today I will talk about the value of investigating experiences and perceptions of nudges, which is something that I think is typically undervalued. There are at least 2 approaches to studying this. The most common way has been to use what I call a description-based approach. This is your typical survey-style study, where people do not themselves engage in a choice task, but are given a description of a nudge to assess. For instance, unacceptability and sometimes for anticipated experiences and feelings. This approach is great for gathering opinion, but it has a disadvantage in that it cannot get at actual experiences, which are highly valuable as well. As people are notoriously bad at predicting future experiences, I think we are often better off using an experience-based approach. In an experience-based approach, participants are subjected to the choice and to the nudge firsthand, and actually experience choosing before providing their thoughts on the nudge. And typically, it is actual experiences and not anticipated experiences that are most informative and valuable. So in what way can they be? Here are 3 senses. I want to stress that none of these are novel. In particular, the first one is pretty common. What I try to do here is present a more overarching framework for ways in which I think experiences and perceptions are valuable. I suggest that especially the latter 2 are greatly underappreciated and should be studied more from an experience-based perspective. Let's dig in shortly to each of them. So first, experiences and perceptions of nudges are valuable as moderators or mediators of behavior change success. Basically, if the nudge gives rise to positive or negative experiences and perceptions, this might impact present and later decision-making. So this might lead to reciprocal behavior or to reactance. We can get at this from investigating perceptions and experiences. We tried this in a paper. We had the idea that if we made the nudge more transparent, so we were more nice about the nudge, this might lead to more favorable perceptions of the choice architect, which in turn might lead to reciprocal behavior in a second choice. And here's the paper. We did not find support for this idea, or we found support for parts of the chain, but not for the full chain. Moving on, second sense, experiences and perceptions of nudges are part of the net effect of the intervention. This is quite simple. If the nudge makes people feel better, this should be counted positively towards the net effect of the nudge. And if it makes people feel bad, this should be counted negatively towards the net effect of the nudge. As nudges typically make greater use of insights into psychology than do other kinds of behavior change interventions, policy interventions in general, I think there's a good case for nudges having larger experiential effects than other types of policy interventions. And this makes experiences and perceptions a more relevant part of the net effect of the intervention. I'm not suggesting that this is not presently known, but I think this is something that is underappreciated. So for instance, in a study, we investigated whether a default nudge influenced people's satisfaction with their choice. And here, a meta-analysis of this paper found that it did not, or well, it actually had a very small effect that was actually positive. But importantly, we did not see that the default nudge decreased people's satisfaction with their choices. And here's the paper for that. Finally, experiences and perceptions can provide an empirical perspective to ethical issues. For instance, are normative arguments empirically realistic? A lot of description-based survey research already investigates people's opinions on ethical matters. But using an experience-based approach, we can get further, and this research is so far fairly scarce. For instance, a critic might claim that a nudge hurts autonomy. Using an experience-based approach, we can test if actual decision makers agree. While this may not decisively settle the issue normatively, it gets way further than only assessing people's opinions and anticipated experiences. So we tested this, whether a default nudge lowered people's experienced autonomy in a series of studies. And again, the meta-analytic effect was very, very small in this case, very, very close to zero. So we could see that people subjected to a default nudge, which is commonly considered one of the most intrusive kinds of nudges, they felt just as autonomous as did people in the control condition, which might be informative to the ethical debate on autonomy and nudging. And this is again from the same paper. So in summary, I have argued that target behavior outcome is not everything when assessing nudges. There is value in people's experiences and perceptions of the nudge as well, and these should be treated as more than merely secondary outcomes. Empirically, I have suggested that even intrusive default nudges may be less autonomy threatening than sometimes is feared. at least as judged by people themselves. And finally, please tell me what policy evaluation frameworks deal more broadly with experiences and perceptions. I mean, there is some work by, for instance, Krinen, Alcott, and of course, some by Sunstein that delves into these kinds of topics. But I feel like there should be more, which I failed to find. So please inform me who else makes a similar kind of arguments for experiences and perceptions of nudges for their value. Thank you very much for listening. Here are some papers in case you're interested, or yeah, if you're interested, just send me an email or talk to me in the chat. Cool. See ya.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick, for the presentation. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't really have time for live questions for VCRs. But as always, please write in the chat any questions, or if you'd like to connect with Patrick as well, he's in the audience. And then, as announced, we will play another early career researcher video, this time from Bella Wren, a PhD student at the Wharton School here at the University of Pennsylvania. It's called Social Motives for Sharing Conspiracy Theories. And if you use the QR code or the link, you can find the relevant paper. Let me just...
Hi everyone, I'm Valeri. I'm a second doctoral student in the Wharton School, and today I'm excited to share our project on the social motives for sharing conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are everywhere, and they're influencing our attitudes and responses to some of the most important crises, such as those related to climate science, anti-democratic behaviors, and the pandemic. Therefore, it's both urgent and crucial to understand when and why people are likely to share conspiracy theories. So why do people share conspiracy theories? Some of recent literature suggests that inattentiveness might be one key factor. So here, researchers propose that people care about sharing accurate information, and they know that misinformation is inaccurate. However, sometimes they share fake news because they forgot to pay attention. Here in our project, we propose a very different account. We postulate that it's true that people want to share accurate information. However, people also want to build social connections when they're communicating. More specifically, we propose that people share information that they know to be untrue in order to build social connections. So for today, I'm going to present you some key takeaways we have for the 3 studies that we ran. In study 1, we surveyed some prolific workers. We presented them with some conspiracy theories and some true news posts and asked about their opinions. What we found was that even when we explicitly reminded participants that true news posts are more accurate than conspiracy theories, people indicated that they would be willing to share conspiracy theories if these conspiracy theories receive a satisfactory number of likes. So what this result suggests is that people will willingly share information that they know to be untrue in order to advance their motivation to build social connections. In study 2 and study 3, people took part in experiments where they made content sharing decisions, and here we're interested in collecting their behavioral responses. For these content sharing decisions, people were presented with some true news posts and some conspiracy theories, and they were asked to choose one of the posts to share with other participants. In study 2, we're interested in studying what do people share when they're motivated to be accurate. What do people share when they're motivated to build social connections? Then in study 3, we want to understand how does social reinforcement change people's content sharing behavior. In study 2, we give people monetary incentive to incentivize different things. What we found was that when people were incentivized to share a piece of accurate information, as you can see in the green bar, almost none of the participants share any conspiracy theories. So what this suggests is that people know what is accurate. Meanwhile, when we incentivize people to share a piece of news that can receive as many comments or as many likes as possible, as you can see in the yellow and the orange bar, almost half of the participants chose to share conspiracy theories. What this suggests is that people expect sharing conspiracy theories to generate more social values. Then in study 3, we asked the question, how does social reinforcement change people's content sharing behavior? So here in this study, people took part in a 5-round interactive post-sharing activity, and we created a post-sharing paradigm that really simulated the actual online social environment that people interact with others. In this paradigm, people choose news to share, and then they're paired with 11 other profiles, which were actually profiles created by us. So on this page, people could like other people's profile, and they will also receive a little notification when somebody else liked their profile. So we randomly assign people into one of the following 3 conditions. For people in the CT reinforcement condition, if they share a conspiracy theory, they receive an above average number of likes, and if they share a piece of true news, they receive a below average number of likes. And this is the opposite in the true news reinforcement condition, and there was no feedback in the control condition. What we found was that people did not change their content sharing behaviors throughout all 5 rounds for the no reinforcement condition. Meanwhile, for the true news reinforcement condition, people directionally decreased their tendency to share conspiracy theories, but this was not a significant decrease. And lastly, for people in the conspiracy theory reinforcement condition, they increased their tendency to share conspiracy theories by almost 100%. What this result suggests is that people are quite sensitive to the social feedback that they receive, and a small social reinforcement, such as the one that we implemented here, could easily shape people's content sharing decisions. In conclusion, our study revealed the following findings. First, people can discern between true news and conspiracy theories. Second, people are willing to trade off accuracy for social connections. And then lastly, when the social rewards are large, people will willingly share conspiracy theories that they know to be untrue. Together, all of these findings reveal important insights into why and when people are particularly likely to share conspiracy theories. And what this finding suggests is that instead of trying to correct the mistaken beliefs of a small subset of people, it might be more effective to change the social incentives related to sharing true news and conspiracy theories. Thank you so much for listening. We welcome any comments, questions, and suggestions.
Great. Thank you so much, Bella, as well, for your presentation. Right, so I see Bella in the audience as well. So if you'd like to ask any questions or connect, please do. And having said this, yeah, I'm going to present our main speaker for today.
Apologies, your screen doesn't share properly. It's zoomed in. Maybe unshare and share again.
Sure. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce Professor Raymond Duch, our main speaker for today. The presentation is called Government Audits, Choice Architecture and Belief Updating. Professor Duch is the co-founder and director of the Center for Experimental Social Sciences at Nuffield College, University of Oxford. He has established and directed similar centers in Chile, China, and India. And he is also the co-director of the Candor project that assembles a global team of research scholars with expertise in behavioral economics and data analytics addressing challenging health policy issues. His research focuses on the application of experimental methods to understand individual decision-making related to politics, finance, health, and economics. And his publications have appeared in leading social science journals, including the American Political Science Review, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, and others. And he frequently advises governments, international organizations, law firms, and corporations. Our moderator for today will be Dr. Eugen Demand, who's an associate professor of practice in behavioral and decision sciences here at Penn and a core member of our center. So with that, Professor Duch, you can continue.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation to spend an hour with all of you. It's a real pleasure and honor. It's a great center, and I'm looking forward to maybe getting some sharp criticism from you guys, which I would appreciate. This is a project that I'm currently working on with my PhD student here at the University of Oxford, Felipe, who's in the audience, and it's in its early stages of data analysis and thinking about the results. So it's a perfect time to get some serious criticism from people who know a lot more about this than I do, probably. So the project is a joint project with Felipe. It's our collaborators, and this is a project that we conducted in Chile. Our collaborators in Chile are Chile Transparencia and the Chilean Ministry of basically the audit ministry at the Chilean government. It's funded by a Chilean Fondesit grant very generously, and the projects were pre-registered at the American Economic Association's website for pre-registration. Just a little bit on the motivation. I won't go through all the literature, but there are two motivating literatures out there that we built on when we did this experiment. And one of them concerns, broadly speaking, governance. And I'm sure all of you have seen this work that looks at the relationship between basically information about corruption, typically and frequently the reports or the corruption information that's generated in audit reports and democratic accountability. So there's a lot of literature that looks at the impact of these audit results on political participation, voting outcomes. Some frequent work, some recent work is by Enrique et al. That was done in Mexico, looking at the relationship between informing individuals about audit reports and how that affected their beliefs and voting decisions. There's an earlier study on Brazil that looked at the impact of Brazilian audit results on re-election probabilities. So, and then more recently, there's this Metaqueta project, this very ambitious project that looked at the relationship between providing people with information about corruption and their likelihood of voting or not voting for incumbents. So there's a large literature that sort of addresses this whole theme about governance, i.e. how information about corruption affects political outcomes and political behavior. And that's one of the motivating themes for this project. The second body of literature that we focused, that we built on is this information, this literature that looks at belief updating, and specifically belief updating experiments. And that tries to understand how to estimate the relationship between information about corruption and the beliefs that the average citizen has about corruption. There's a growing literature that utilizes these online information experiments, survey experiments, and tries to understand how providing average citizens with information about corruption, about public debt, about consumer prices, how that affects their beliefs. Do they update when they receive information about the state of the economy or the state of politics? So this is the foundation for this project. And we're going to look at specifically Chile, and we're specifically looking at the information that's generated by the Chilean audit entity annually. And they generate information annually on about 180 municipalities. They characterize the amount of irregularities in each of those municipalities. Typically, a typical municipality in Chile has irregularities that amount to about $2 million. The agency spends a lot of money to generate this data. And the experiment I'm going to report on today simply asks one simple question, and that is, what is the impact of this information on the beliefs of the average citizen? Does providing citizens with information about the malfeasance behavior of their politicians, their local politicians, affect their beliefs at all? Does it sort of move the dial at all in terms of their beliefs about corruption in their local community? And I think it's sort of an important question because these entities spend a tremendous amount of data generating this information. Now, clearly, it's not their only goal to try to affect beliefs of local citizens, but it clearly is one of their goals. And all we're going to do in this experiment, after many years of work, is basically try to understand whether this information results in belief updating on the part of the average citizen. And I think we leverage a fairly unique situation in order to understand the relationship. So this is the 2020 audit program that was implemented by the agency. And this is Chile, this long weird thing up there. The yellow parts are the municipalities that were not audited. The orange are the municipalities that were audited and had a positive outcome, and the red are the municipalities that were audited and had a negative outcome. And notice that there are more negatives than positives. And a negative essentially means that the result of the 2020 audit basically suggested that they had more serious malfeasance reported in 2020 than they did in their previous audit. And positive is the opposite. This is essentially the experiment. And I'll just briefly go over it. So in 2020, the audit agency audited 116 of the 345 municipalities in Chile. We recruited 57,000 subjects to participate in our experiment. They were recruited from the 116 communities that were audited. I should point out, we recruited these people more than a year before the actual audits were conducted and reported. There were about 46,000 eligible respondents that we kept in our database. And ultimately, we conducted a baseline survey, pre-treatment survey, with about 5,500 of these individuals. And again, it's important to note that the pre-treatment measurements were conducted 4 to 5 months before the audit reports were released by the Contraloria. These individuals were then block randomly assigned based on their priors and the community that the municipality they lived in. Within each of the 116 communities, we randomly assigned our subjects to either a treatment group, so we ended up with about 3,600 in treatment, or to a placebo group. We ended up with about 1,800 people in the placebo. So within each of these 116 communities, we had individuals randomly assigned to treatment and placebo. The treated individuals received an actual report of the audit agency's results for their municipality. The placebo subjects received a very innocuous report about living conditions in their municipality. The treatments were 45-second videos that informed them about malfeasance in their community, or a 45-second placebo. They were delivered by a chatbot interface via WhatsApp. Right after, as part of receiving the video, they had about 2 or 3 chatbot questions about just basically to ensure that they were treated. 4 to 7 days after they were treated, that we administered a post-treatment survey. This was administered to 3,500 people. And then 1 month after the treatment, we administered a follow-up survey, and we had about 2,200 participants comply with or participate in the follow-up. A brief aside, now I know I'm going to run out of time, but a brief aside, there's this question about, well, what information treatments should we use in delivering this information about malfeasance to our subjects? Well, we took this very seriously, and I think it's an important question to ask. Well, how should we present this information to the subjects, right? What is, we always raise the possibility of null effects by presenting the information improperly or in a non-convincing way to the subjects, right? So we conducted an experiment prior to conducting the main experiment, in which we basically tested 24 different possible video presentations of the malfeasance information. And basically we produced videos that presented the information in either a temporal, i.e. comparing current to past malfeasance, versus a spatial, in which you would compare your municipality with other municipalities in the region. We assign people to a high and a low malfeasance treatment. Then we had a variety of ways of presenting the data, the malfeasance information to the respondents. I'm not going to go and this is the basis for another paper. Respondents received, again, over WhatsApp, 6 different randomly assigned videos that they were asked with a chatbot interface to evaluate. And this provided us with what we believe to be the optimal presentation of malfeasance information to your average citizen in Chile. And this essentially is the video treatment. It's 45 seconds, and subjects learn three things essentially in this video. They learn, and everybody learns this, there's corruption in your municipality. So that's the one thing everybody learns. I mean, there were no municipalities with zero corruption. So everybody learns that there's some corruption. They learn whether it's higher or lower than the previous audit. And of course, they learn how much corruption or the value of corruption in the municipality. And from the previous pre-testing or experiment, one of the things we learned is that the best way to present this information is in terms of foregone losses. And in this case, we present the information in terms of foregone influenza vaccines that could have been generated if that money hadn't been used for corrupt goals. So three pieces of information. There is corruption, temporal evaluation, how has it changed over time, and how much corruption is there in your municipality. This is essentially the data, and it identifies on the left-hand side, basically, the red dots are the municipalities that had higher levels of corruption. The green dots are the municipalities that had lower amounts of corruption. And the horizontal axis is just the log of malfeasance that was observed in their community. So it just sort of summarizes the data on the left-hand side. The right-hand side is an interesting, yes, Christina.
I have a question. I didn't get it, this information. Did you, in some studies, give people a comparison of the municipality level of corruption with other municipalities or no?
That's a good question. We didn't, because in the the sort of experiment where we tested the videos, it turns out that the temporal, i.e. comparing your performance with past performance, people found much more persuasive than the spatial, which was comparing your municipality with other municipalities.
Okay.
So we in this pre-design stage, we decided that the temporal would be the most effective. Now, maybe we were wrong. It's possible,
no,
but that's
Thank you.
Sure.
Ray,
So
let me just ask a related
graph,
question. Ray, if you don't mind, just a related question I posted in the chat, which is, do you have any, Felipe answers right now. Let me just ask anyway, which is, do you have any, did you elicit any beliefs about your participants' expectation in a way of, how rampant corruption is before you provide information? Because you might pick up some heterogeneity with respect to how far people are off with their beliefs relative to the information provided.
Very good question. I'll show you a graph in a minute.
Great, thank you. Yeah, as I asked, Felipe answered it, so yeah.
It's a very good question. There's some interesting problems here, and the right-hand graph, I think, identifies one of them, and that is the horizontal axis is you can think about it as the average over multiple audits, the average performance of the municipality, and high means that they do poorly. So as you get out to the 100, that means the municipality has performed poorly. And the the vertical axis just gives you an indication of what their corruption levels looked like in this current audit per capita corruption. And actually, and this is a response to one of your colleagues who raised this question at the APSA conference, Guy Grossman. And basically, what this suggests is that there's no relationship between what we observe in the 2020 audit and how municipalities have typically performed over time, right? Which raises a number of issues, right? Well, maybe municipal citizens discount these reports because they're not a particularly good indicator of what's going on, right? And they vacillate quite a bit from one audit to the next. So it's possible that that there's some discounting going on by citizens because they don't find the signal particularly useful. So I'm just throwing that out as a possible caveat. Our outcome variables, we have three outcome variables, three primary outcome variables I'll be talking about. One is the subjective scale of corruption. Basically, we ask people to, on a 1 to 10 scale, to indicate how corrupt their municipality is. That's the qualitative measure. And then we had two quantitative measures that are incentivized. One of them is called distribution, in which we asked people, we give people, I'm sorry, I don't have the graph, I should have. We give people a bar chart and we say, here's very corrupt, less corrupt, not corrupt, good. And we give them the distribution of municipalities in Chile, and we ask them to indicate, where do you think your municipality is situated amongst these four possible categories? And if they get it right, they get compensated. So that's one incentivized measure of quantitative measure of corruption in the municipality. And then we also ask them, for every 1,000 Chilean pesos of tax expenditures in your municipality, how much of that is associated with corrupt behavior? And then they had 10 choices, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, et cetera. And then if they got that correct, they were also compensated. So we have two sort of quantitative measures incentivized of corruption in the municipality, and then we have a subjective measure. And we ask these in pre-treatment and then in post-treatment. And so this is essentially the belief updating metric that we will use. So this is basically the issue you raised. So on the top half, on the top of columns, we have the actual levels of corruption in the municipality, high, medium, or low, and then then we present the sort of a crosstab of the three outcome variables. In which the first row is low and the last row is high. And basically we look at whether there's a relationship between people's subjective assessments or incentivized assessments of corruption in their municipality and actual levels of corruption in their municipality. And the punchline here is there's no relationship, right? So in other words, the measures of beliefs about corruption in the municipality are not at all correlated with actual levels of corruption in the municipality. Now, this might link back to that earlier table that I showed you, in which people just discount the signal they're getting from the audit agency. So the very simple contribution of this couple years of work is some insights into the extent to which this information causes belief updating on the part of the citizen. And I think the design is, I think, reasonably robust in the sense that the pre-treatment measures are conducted well in advance of the audits. And so I think we're getting a reasonable sort of a view of the extent to which getting this information affects people's beliefs about corruption. This is the simplest way to characterize belief updating, I think. We're basically here simply saying your corrupt beliefs post-treatment or your posteriors are a function of your corrupt priors treatment, which is dichotomous, whether you were in treatment and got some information about corruption or not, right? So here, this is basically comparing the placebo group to the treatment group, and that's it. And then some control there, the XI are basically a set of controls. So this, I think, is the simplest way to sort of characterize belief updating in the population. And it works. There clearly is a treatment effect, right? For all three of our outcome variables, the qualitative outcome variable, the resource, and the distribution incentivized measures, in all those cases, we see the treatment effect is actually quite significant, right? We do see, and in all cases, we see a treatment effect. And actually, I could stop here, and this is essentially what I think is the most important result from the study. What it suggests, though, is that simply informing people that there's corruption in their municipality has an impact on beliefs. This is essentially, this treatment variable here is simply capturing the people who were treated, i.e. got some information about corruption and the impact it has on their posterior beliefs about corruption. So it's sort of encouraging, although it's pretty limited, right? So we then sort of explore the extent to which subjects pay attention to some of the detail of the video treatment, right? Of course, the video treatment had information about magnitudes, also about temporal comparisons. And the question is whether the subjects incorporate any of that information into their updated posteriors. So here we've simply incorporated the magnitude of malfeasance into the estimation, the log of malfeasance. And of particular interest here is the B4 coefficient, right? The product of log malfeasance and whether you were in treatment. This is just a binned plot that gives you some sense of whether there's an effect. The left-hand side are the control subjects. The right-hand side are the treated subjects, and the horizontal axis is log malfeasance. And if you look at the data, there's a mild relationship in amongst the treated subjects between log of malfeasance and their post-treatment corruption beliefs, and there's no relationship in the control. So that gives you some sense of this is just some sense of what's going on in the data. And if you look at the multivariate, there's a weak effect. there's a very weak effect of the log of malfeasance for the amongst the treated, and change in their posteriors about corruption. And I mean, if you, I've not done it, but if you, I'm almost positive if you just sort of explore the additional power you get out of adding this additional dimension to explaining posteriors, it's pretty weak, right? Most of the action is being captured by this treatment, simply whether people are in treatment or not in treatment, right? It doesn't seem like they're investing a tremendous amount of effort into incorporating magnitudes into their updating behavior. They may also be even more sophisticated and be actually engaging in some Bayesian learning, right? So Bayesian updating may be occurring here. So the extent to which their posteriors are shaped by this gap between their priors regarding corruption and the real value of corruption based on the signal we're getting from the audit agency. So the question is, does this gap in some sense affect the extent or magnitude of their updating their posteriors? And so we explored this in the analysis. And just to, as a prelude, what this is suggesting, if people are engaging in Bayesian updating, then post treatment they should have more accurate assessments of actual corruption in their municipality. And with respect to the resources variable, they don't. They're actually, because this is measuring how accurate they are. In fact, they become less accurate in post-treatment. They go from minus 1.61 to minus 2.22. If they're perfectly accurate, it should be 0. But in the case of the distribution variable, we do see some evidence of Bayesian updating. They're actually, in the case of this outcome variable, they're closer to 0. So there's some notion that people are using their priors, or the difference between their priors and the signal, to update their beliefs about corruption. So that actually I found quite interesting. And if you look at the multivariate, it's exactly what you would expect. On the distribution, you do see this the coefficient on the gap or the difference between truth and priors. You do see that it does have a significant effect. So there actually is some evidence that Bayesian learning is going on. Again, I would qualify it. It's not gigantic, and it doesn't really ramp up the variance explained, if you want to express it in those terms. But it clearly exists.
Ray, real quick, a question that Jordi asked, and related to a comment I posted about the asymmetry of belief updating. So Jordi asked, did the individuals who initially believe that there's no corruption change their beliefs less?
Did people who believed that? It's a good question. I'm not sure. I think I've looked at this, but I don't know. But that's a good question, and it's something I may have looked at, but I can't tell you definitively. I think it's a good idea. I mean, and I know that Felipe and I have thought about it, but I don't have the specific answer. The next slide gets at something similar, but not. It doesn't really address what you're suggesting. I think that's a good idea. the next, so there's some evidence of Bayesian updating, which is encouraging. The last dimension we explored is asymmetry, but not exactly the asymmetry that was raised. And here, subjects, if you recall the video treatment, subjects are told whether their municipality has improved or gotten worse since their last audit report. And here we explore whether people pay attention to that information. So here we basically, this is basically just an interaction between whether they get a negative, whether they got a negative report and the treatment, right? And the reference category obviously is the positive. And the issue is whether individuals actually, whether they update their priors differently if they got a positive signal than whether they got a negative signal, right? And here the evidence is less encouraging. So here we're just comparing the control and treatment groups, right? And what you see here is people who got the negative, people who got a negative information, i.e. their municipality got worse. You do see people basically increasing, right? The treatment subjects become more negative than the control. And so we see this across all three indicators. But what's also the case is people who got a positive signal also get more negative on all three of our outcome variables. So, and this is what leads us to believe that really what matters here is simply informing people that there's corruption in their municipality. Telling them that their municipality has gotten better or worse doesn't resonate. They simply respond to this notion of, oh, I'm being reminded that there's corruption in my municipality, and I update my priors to become to assume there's more negative, more corruption in my municipality than I originally thought. So that does seem to be a theme that we see in the data, and of course we see that in the multivariate. And what's relevant here is the multivariate. The treatment variable is positive. In other words, if you were treated, you, regardless of whether you're treated positively or negatively, you have more negative posteriors about corruption. It is the case that it's slightly more stronger if you're in the negative, if you're in the negative treatment group, but the treatment coefficient is still positive for everybody, right? So the punchline here is that people clearly are not focusing on the quantitative information we're providing them with in the video. Now, this is why I answered Christina's question about spatial a little bit ambiguously, because maybe, Christina, you're right. Maybe it's not temporal, right? Maybe it's the spatial that ought to be the relevant sort of metric. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that the spatial may have an effect, i.e. to get information. Suppose you are an underestimator. okay, of how much corruption there is in your municipality, and you get information about, the fact that other municipalities are, let's say, less corrupt.
Yeah.
These may have a big effect on your posterior, much bigger, because you see the difference, and the difference enter in your, posterior evaluation, basically. And so I think we always, actually, normally, we human beings always make comparative evaluations. We always make comparison. And so the time is obviously interesting, but I think the special would be very important, both to see how over and underestimators react to that.
Right.
Okay. Another question I have, which is much more general. I have a result from, a recent study we did in the US, and it's a totally different study, but we do, we look at overestimator, underestimator of income quartiles, and in particular of poverty in the US.
Right.
And what we see, there are lots of underestimators among a certain class of people, and we give them census information. We give them true information. They know it's true information. So they do change their belief. They consistently change their beliefs. However, when we look then at their policy preferences, they remain unchanged. So it is interesting here. So you're clearly changing people's beliefs.
Yes.
Now, the question is there a way to see if this belief change would ensue in some sort of actual behavioral change? Now, I don't know what, in fact, these people could do, beyond maybe voting for certain politicians, I don't know what they can or cannot do. But I think it would be very interesting, since you have some data about belief change, to check if it would ensure in some sort of behavioral, important behavioral change. So data that belief change exists. The problem is, does it change behavior?
Right. So your 2 points. One is this is Felipe's big sort of criticism of the design, I think, and that is, well, I like to be criticized by my students. He really wanted to sort of explore the impact it had on voting decisions, right? And so that's one thing, and it was complicated given the design. I still think we can do something, but I agree with you. We did, and I'll show it in 1 second. We did incorporate a behavioral outcome, which we tried to do, and I'm not sure whether you'll find it credible or not. But I'll in the next 5 minutes I have left, I'll try to I'll present it for sure. But I think you're right. I mean, the behavioral outcome is the critical thing here, and that would have been the optimal design, but. I will. So this is the punchline, and this sort of gets at what Christina was saying. We tried to incorporate into the design this notion of whether some of this learning was spurious, right? And one thing was clear is, and basically, since we asked the follow-up survey, we were able to evaluate whether the treatment effects persisted over a month's period, and they do. I mean, it's quite encouraging. I mean, there's some slippage. So the red is the immediate post-treatment, and the blue is the 1 month post-treatment. And you do get quite a bit of persistence over a 1 month period, which leads us to believe doesn't tell us how they'll behave, but it does lead us to believe that we're observing sort of robust, real change in beliefs. We even see it with the Bayesian updating. Again, pretty robust over the post-treatment and then the 1 month period. So that's one of the efforts we implemented to try to assess whether this is spurious learning or real learning, and we're encouraged. And finally, and this gets at Christina's point, we did include in the design, in both pre-treatment and post-treatment, we asked people whether they would be interested in donating 500 Chilean pesos to their municipality, right, to aid the municipality in I forget now, a particular undertaking. And the idea here was to try to simulate the extent to which individuals would be comfortable contributing to a public good, right? And the idea was that, well, if in fact these information provision really works, right, then people who got positive treatments should be more inclined to contribute, and people who got negative treatment should be less likely. And we do find, I was quite surprised, a robust result. We find a positive correlation between malfeasance reported by the audit authorities and the willingness to donate. And again, the other important thing to note about this result is this is the post-treatment donation, and we control for, because they were asked to donate both pre and post, so we control here for their pre-treatment donation. So I think it's a reasonable indicator of behavioral indicator. It's not, I mean, again, it is vaguely hypothetical, but it is a costly behavior. And so we found this to be, again, a reasonably positive result. Heterogeneity, I'll just basically summarize in 1 minute. We do find that on the Bayesian learning updating, an education effect. So higher educated people are more likely to engage in Bayesian learning. We don't really find it for the baseline model, which I think makes sense. So the more sort of demanding, cognitively demanding activity, we do find an education effect, but we don't with respect to the sort of baseline activity. And so the conclusions are, video treatments convey 3 pieces of information. Basically, malfeasance is present in the municipal government. We find a strong effect for this. The magnitude of the malfeasance, we find a weak effect. Temporal trend in malfeasance, we find no effect. On Bayesian learning, there's some limited evidence that belief updating is Bayesian in this case. On spurious learning, I think we provide some reasonable evidence that we're not capturing spurious learning here, that belief updating persists, and people seem to be willing to behave in a costly fashion, in a fashion we would expect them to do, given the information they learn. And finally, we find some heterogeneity with respect to the more challenging belief updating. And that's
great. Thank you so much, Ray. Great job, great project. So Felipe did a good job answering many questions in the chat already. So we still have a few minutes for that, so feel free to post or raise your hand. So let me start with one of my own on the slide, which is, do you have a good intuition as to why the magnitude does not really matter too much? Do you think they perceive that as like a dichotomy? You know, essentially, what is your intuition? Why do you think that?
So well, there are two things that could be going on. One of which I can't really. One of them is that original slide I showed you. Basically, maybe it's plausible that they're just discounting the quantitative information they're getting from the authorities. That's plausible. I mean, there is a weak effect, but it's so some people clearly are sort of responding to it. But I think my other speculative speculation is that, and I do think this has policy implications. I mean, I'm not sure people are paying a lot of attention to the quantitative. I don't think most people are paying attention to the quantitative information. I think they're told they're being reminded that there's corruption in their municipality. And I think that's driving their updating a lot, right? And that simple reminder that, regardless of how big it is, there's corruption in your municipality, that just triggers a response. And I think that's sort of plausible. I mean, just reminding people that there's some corruption has that impact, and that going beyond that, people don't sort of calibrate. I mean, they just basically say, "Oh, really?" And then that's it. That's my speculative sort of.
Yeah, and I feel like you could probably, if you have the ability to tease this apart and really wanted to, you can probably think of other types of reminders that convey no information, right? But just like a reminder about corruption, right? And you sort of take care of that channel, and then maybe you can disentangle that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, right. But that would be my intuition too. I think it's more about the reminder than the actual factual information. But this is exciting to learn in your context. Jordi has a question about the placebo video, whether you could provide some more information, what this looked like. And
okay, so the Felipe probably knows this better than I, but it was basically structured exactly the same as the treatment video, except it provided some information about the population of the municipality, the square miles, square kilometers of the municipality. So very factual information about the features of the municipality.
Great. All right. So I think we reached the end. There are no pressing questions anymore in the audience. Ray, this was amazing. Thanks so much. Paulius, feel free to conclude and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Remember, in 2 weeks, we have our next talk, and we will send you the video of this session and reminders, as always, next week. So thank you so much.
And great job, Patrick and Bella. Great job.
Attention and questions. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you so much to all the speakers as well for joining.